Well, it's Children's Day, and a whole lot must be said about this Chibok unfortunate issue, which a lot of people are still worried. You just saw the Chief of Defense Staff saying that, well, we know where they are, but we have to be very careful because we're talking about the lives of young Nigerians. These are children, and if anything, they would have been celebrating today if that incident hadn't happened. What can we do, knowing full well that, well, even our appeals to the terrorists is not even hitting any result, and we have seen some kind of concerted effort. The president had visited France with other countries to see what they can do to help get these girls out. Because as it is now, from what the CDS has said, he said, we're making progress.
Yes, I think that it is not simply that the insurgents are not listening to appeals, but I think that it is because the channel of appeals, is not properly put into use. There are people within us in Nigeria that these elements listen to, respect, or are willing, as it were, to listen to.
Even though they're not members.
Even though they may not be members. Yes, I agree to the fact that they may not be members because they may have a different idea, a different indoctrination, as it were, of Islam. But we need to get to the Boko Haram insurgents through the appropriate channels, and it involves also a mind-changing endeavor towards those people that we think, that we can see through intelligence, that Boko Haram can listen to. If you can get those people on our side, and then ask them, put them out to the insurgents, and start talking to them, there will be a channel. Through that channel, we can dialogue. Ordinarily, under international law, negotiation is always a hard call. It's a difficult call. International law, in recent times, has ruled out negotiation. Even the United States have a principle called the no concession principle to terrorists or to insurgents, as it were. But being a non-state actor in an armed conflict does not mean that you cannot dialogue. It is in throwing up dialogues that possibilities of agreement may be arrived at, without necessarily saying you're negotiating, because negotiation means that it presupposes that there is a right existing as between the parties.
Let me ask you this, because for weeks you've been in Abuja with the national conference. Did this ever pop up during deliberations in the national conference?
Well, it may not be right to say that I have been with the national conference. I have only been around Abuja trying to study the processes and the events of the national conference the best way I can. I'm not a delegate, but I am following all the steps. I would say that it may not have propped up in the appropriate manner, because if you intend that it should prop up in the appropriate manner, you must discuss it as a whole. You may even have to dedicate a committee, and that committee, in my view, would encompass just the entire political restructuring, entire devolution, entire principle of security that the national conference has on its table. And in my view, it is not just to say that we should discuss Boko Haram. It's a situation where you can say everything you're discussing, bear in mind the tendencies, the recent tendencies of insurgency. And it now goes to the question of how we can restructure, how we can devolve power in such a way as to affect the people down there, in such a way as to ensure good governance. And it points to the fact of the constitutional impediments to development, because I am sure that some of these insurgents, even though it is not poverty, mark my words, it may not be poverty that is the root cause of insurgency, but a lot of them are also drawn by economic benefits to join. Yes.
What's the constitutional impediments there?
One of the constitutional impediments is, for example, where everybody goes to a central pool to collect revenue without bearing reference to the contribution you are making. There is need that if you are going to collect money somewhere, you have invested some sort of, you are contributing some sort of. Without contributing, you are encouraged to be lazy. And encouraging you to be lazy means that you cannot develop appropriately. And so that is one constitutional impediment to development. Another constitutional impediment to development is that Nigerians do not have ownership. There's no collective ownership, and therefore no collective allegiance to our constitution. There has to be an imprimatur of the people, and the National Conference ought to address that, wherein the people will say, yes, we made this for ourselves, even if it's the same content. Without imprimatur, without collective ownership, collective allegiance, it's easy for us to identify with the problems of the country and properly exert our individual abilities and resources to effect changes.
The comment. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you think that the sources of revenue too generally make for laziness, in the sense that, you know, so far so good. What we have accruing to the federal accounts is, you know, mostly resources gotten from natural resources, not through dint of hard work, you know, contributed by many states.
Exactly. You see, let me draw an analogy. The human anatomy, we've got a heart that supplies and retrieves blood from the entire system. The heart will not work if it is only releasing blood. At a point in time, the other parts of the body will be filled with blood, and the heart will be deprived of blood. And so the heart will die, and the body will die. And so it's natural that there has to be a spread out of contribution into the central post. And it may interest us to appreciate, to agree, that there's no part of Nigeria today that is not properly endowed, adequately endowed with both natural resources, human resources, and whatever resources you may wish to think about.
The question will be, how do you think that the focus can begin to change or shift from that, you know, over-concentration on endowment of natural resources?
I think that was one of the main reasons why the need for the National Conference arose in the first place. Unfortunately, as the National Conference is going presently, it may not be addressing that need. I think that...
why do you say so?
From the reports we have been hearing, we have heard that some of the committees, we have heard what some of the committees have agreed to, for example. We have even heard that there was a minority report with regards to devolution of power, with regards to resource control. And that minority report was thrown out the windows at the National Conference, insisting, as it were, the chairman of the National Conference, insisting, as it were, that there is no provision for minority reports. And I think that it is with due respect, with utmost profound respect to the learned retired Justice of the Supreme Court, that it ought not to be so. The requirement of consensus, the requirement of 70% as an alternative to consensus is not at the committee stage. So if you don't get consensus at the committee stage, or if you get, as it were, if you get 70% vote at the committee stage, you say you have majority. There's a report of the majority, yes, but there is a minority. It is incumbent on the National Conference to accept the result of the minority, table it before the plenary. That is where the consensus requirement is useful, not at the committee stage. So I think that this is, in answering your question, that we need to look at the real issues for which the National Conference was convoked in the first place. And some of these real issues include the fact that everybody, in my view, seem to be in agreement that Nigeria needs restructuring.
I'm going to ask you what your thoughts have been, you know, I mean, because when we saw the abduction of the girls, so I want to ask you what your thoughts were on government's response, the protest, and finally, international intervention.
Yes, I think the government response was slow. I think there was lack of synergy between the relevant authorities. I think that they were playing at variance with each other. They were acting at variance with each other. I think that there are...
By the relevant authorities?
By the relevant, yes. They
you
were
mean
acting,
who and who?
Federal, state, and local governments. They were acting at variance with themselves at the initial stages. A lot of politics went into the the occasion. And it was the need, the call for international help was coming late. I have always opined that under the principle of responsibility to protect, the international community, to an extent, had a duty, an obligation, even before the abduction of the Chibok girls, to have intervened in Nigerian insecurity then, to help Nigeria. So I think that even where the Nigerian government failed to seek international help, international authorities, under the principle of responsibility to protect, ought to have catalyzed, invoked that their power, their responsibility, their obligation, and offered assistance.
How do you think would I receive that in line with, you know, the principles of sovereignty?
Yes, we may not receive it, but it would have been on record that such principle was offered to be used by the international community, and we rejected it. That's how I see it.